So that's wonderful. So you went to that talent show, you're 8 or 9, you're singing, you're moving about the country. Now, how has moving about the country, looking back, or even what you took in the moment, was that just misery as a child? Did you find the good? Was it one and the other back and forth? How do you look at that?
Yeah, so as a child, it was not such a great thing for me. Just felt like I had to keep trying to fit in. I didn't retain friendships from my foundational years because I kept moving. Of course, looking back now as an adult, I can see the positives that I very quickly learned how to acclimate and to make friends and to be able to build community for myself in whatever situation I am in. And part of that is due to having to move so much as a kid.
Are you an only child, or were there siblings?
I have a younger brother.
Okay. So now, as a young teen, what's going on? Are you still singing and seeing a future on the stage for yourself? What did you want to do? What were your parents looking to have you do too?
Well, it was an interesting time for me. I was definitely a rebel as a teenager, and I was very much involved with play production. And so I was kind of unique. I was with the play production group. I was wearing the polo shirts and Levi's and topsiders, and I shaved stripes in the side of my head. So I kind of didn't quite fit in any place. And I thought that I wanted to pursue a career as an actor. And actually, my parents had decided to move again in my senior year, and I was done moving. So I graduated high school a semester early, and that's when I auditioned for the American Academy of Dramatic Arts and was accepted at the time as their youngest student. I was 17 years old. So I thought that's what I wanted. Truthfully, though, I didn't really have a clear vision. I wasn't really solid on exactly what I wanted to do or what it was going to look like. It was just sort of the path I had been following, and so I continued with that path.
Were your parents supportive of their daughter going into an artistic career?
I think they really surprised me by allowing me, to be emancipated. That's what we needed to do to legally emancipate me at 17 years old. So I was very surprised that they allowed me to do that. I was completely surprised that I made the case to go to this acting school and that they allowed for it. Were they thrilled? Do they want me to be an actor or a singer? Probably not. They're very practical. My mom used to talk to me about, hey, don't you want to be a lawyer? And yeah, so they were not, delighted that I was going to pursue that path. And to their credit, though, they did create space for me, and they helped fund me to be able to go to the academy and to pursue that.
Were you law material? Were you a straight A student?
I was a very good student, except for math. Math has always been my downfall, and there's actually backstory there. My grandfather was a mathematician who was not the nicest of people and instilled so much fear for me around math that I feel like I have post-traumatic stress disorder around it.
How
But
so? What did he
yeah,
like ask you to round pi to the 20th decimal? Like, how was he aggressive about math?
well, I just have a memory of probably being around 5 or 6 years old, and he was quizzing me like, "What's 5 plus 5?" It's 10.
Got
And
it.
he was a big man, and he was not a nice character. And he didn't even live near me, and I blanked out 4 years of math. So you can only imagine what the experience was for my mother growing up with him.
Hmm.
But other than math, I was a decent student, and it really took I worked very hard to get good grades. Yeah.
What is let's talk about your mom for a minute, because I'd love to connect those dots now, knowing a little insight into your grandfather, her father. What is or was your mom's career?
Originally, she wanted to be a doctor, and her parents said, no, women are not doctors. So they told her that she needed to be a teacher, and she got her master's in library science. But as soon as I was born, pretty quickly, she became a full-time mom. Here and there, she did some bookkeeping and worked in doctor's offices, but primarily she was a stay-at-home mom, which was necessary because my dad traveled quite a bit, and so it was good
Mm.
that she was at home.
Wow. So you went and got accepted as the youngest student accepted into the American Academy of Dramatic Arts, the California campus. I know that there's one in New York, because my performing journeys took me across town from their campus to the American Musical and Dramatic Academy. But we knew of all of you, and you knew of all of us. So you go there, and how's that experience?
It was really challenging for me. I, um, as I mentioned, the reason I love to perform is that it's connecting to my value of creative self-expression. And some of the classes allowed for that, but as soon as I remember, I had a teacher that taught us the method acting using Uta Hagen, and as soon as we got into that, that really got me into my head. And like every moment has to have a beat with a backstory, and I lost connection with my feelings. And it really was challenging for me because my perfectionist, I didn't even know I was a perfectionist at the time, but that's what was happening for me. Was I started to get very critical, and I can't get this, and this is so hard. Even my musical theater class where I was singing, which was always my passion, the instructor was so critical and so nitpicky that it just took me out of the joy of performing.
And then, how many years of a program is this?
Well, it can be up to a 3-year program. And what happened to me at the end of my first year is I wasn't accepted back into the second year. And which I later learned there was a lot of internal bureaucracy and some things going on there. At the time, though, I was devastated. I thought, wow, I must really suck at this. And I took the road more frequently, traveled, and very quickly applied to college and got my degree in business with an emphasis in human resources management, and literally stopped performing for over 20 years.
Wow. Did they, at least on paper, why weren't you asked back?
It was I don't remember the details. All I remember was like basically the message was we believe you should pursue other career options, and it
Yeah.
was terrible.
Yeah, I mean, I was again, a very similar story, almost the opposite in stories. I, right out of high school, went, terrible student, C's and D's on a good day, and always wanted to perform and did community theater. So I ran to the chance to audition for the BFA acting program at Montclair State University in my home state, the great Garden State of New Jersey, and I got accepted as a freshman. But I was young, I was so naive, I had no idea about anything, but I got accepted, so I was thrilled, and I saw a grand future for myself, gave it my all in that acting program, and like you, it's a every year audition, and lo and behold, after freshman year, we audition for the dean, and then I meet with her, and she says, "We are not going to ask you back. Here's a box of tissues." And it was just, I was like, yeah, I was devastated. I was like, what? But then looking back, it's like, well, of course I had what was I offering there? And then you try to make sense of it all in your bedroom that you grew up in that summer, and that's when I went to New York at the Musical Theater Conservatory. So there you go. So now you are back. You're now in college.
Yeah, so I graduated college, and then went to, I lived in San Diego for a little while. I attempted actually to take a couple of acting and singing classes while I was there. And as I mentioned, I just have this memory. I literally in the singing class had to like train myself. At this moment, you will move this arm because I was like glue. I just couldn't move. I was so fearful. It was really, really challenging for me to put myself out there in that way.
Were you fearful because the sting of the Dramatic Academy asking you to leave, was that the whole thing?
Yeah, it just really killed my confidence, and I had those gremlins going on telling me, "Wow, you suck. Like, why are you doing this? You know, you're not good at it. So why don't you let it go and do something more practical?" And that's really what prompted me into my career in human resources and training and development, and now as a coach.
Let's talk about the irony in that human resources era. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so one of my first big jobs, I was the human resources manager at EMI Music Distribution, which at the time represented 10 record labels, including Capitol, Virgin. And I had an amazing office with CDs everywhere and plaques, and it seemed great. And I went to a lot of shows, and all that was wonderful. And while that was happening, I was really conflicted and torn inside for a couple reasons. One is being in human resources. That's a whole other story. And the second is because here I am in this creative environment and I'm dying to sing. And I would not even tell anybody that I sang or that I performed. Nobody knew any of that. So it was like really sort of like hiding, and nobody knew this other identity I had. And at that time I was still in my perfectionism mode, and what perfectionism is putting on a mask. And that mask is, hey, if I can act and look quote unquote perfect, then I can hide whatever insecurities, judgment, shame I might be experiencing internally. And to the world, I'm putting on this facade and this mask of perfection.
I'm so glad you said that, because the whole foundation of this brand that we're here, the hidden entrepreneur, is exactly that. I use that same lingo, the mask and the hiding and the guilt and the shame. For me, though, there was absolutely the only thing missing from that was perfectionism. No, nobody would even claim that that remotely defined me. I never identified with that. I was just hiding. I didn't want to be seen. I couldn't. My show up skill was that of the court jester, the clown, right? I would make a joke and just, hey, look at me, to deflect. And I guess that's why I entered the theater and, went that route to just, be someone else and sort of push aside everything that you really do identify with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow. What a powerful story. And how awesome that you're doing this now. Very cool.
Yeah, that's the goal for all of us, right? To, at any point in your life, sooner, later, what have you, never too late to what? So that's what you do for your clients. In essence, you help them determine where and how they want to go.
Yeah, and even in a business capacity, like I mentioned Facebook, for example, I do quite a bit of work with their managers. There's always an element of looking within. And what I'm really passionate about, one of my passions, is inspiring reflection and results. Because I think so much of our day-to-day, we're so caught up with the crisis of the day and trying to be in service to others that we disconnect from our values, from our strengths, from the work-life balance. So even when I'm working on business goals with leaders, I'm always looking at not just at what we're doing, but who are we being in that process? And are we being intentional and really honoring who we are and our values and our strengths?
You talk about values. That's another word that, if I allow it, just becomes a word. How do we identify our values? What is a value?
Great question. So most people, when they hear the word value, automatically go to morals. And morals are imposed from the outside and tell us how we should act. Values, on the other hand, are intrinsic to who we are. They're core pieces of who we are. And we want to honor those values. Sometimes there's overlap with morals. Usually, though, like creative self-expression I shared with you is one of my values, it's not going to be a cookie cutter like responsibility, honesty. And once we have a sense of what those values are, now we can take a look at prioritizing them and also identify how we're honoring those values. And if we're not honoring those values, it's almost like a piece of us dies because it is so core to who we are that we need to find a way to integrate it into our lives.
I know the word values really is correct me if I'm wrong. It's literally the same as what do I value, right? Is that a good initial way to for me to enter that conversation to determine? Because I know you sort of said responsibility and integrity and honesty. I mean, are those not values, or are those just like a cookie cutter checklist that people feel like they should and not really getting to the heart of things?
So the word should is a key word. If you're looking at any of these labels and it feels like you should be, that should be a value, chances are it's not a value. Chances are it's more of a moral. Not to say that it's wrong or bad, it's just something that you've been conditioned to believe is a way that you should or you're supposed to be, versus a value where that's just how you are. And again, there can be flow and overlap between the two. So just to give you an example, some people will say they have a value around security. If I start to delve deeper and I ask them, what's the energy with security? How do you feel when you're thinking about security? What does security really mean to you? If they come from a place of like, wow, I love when I have this sense of security and I like to set up my financial situation and feel solid and it's a positive, it might be a value. If, on the other hand, it's coming from a fear-based place and they're petrified of not being stable, then most likely it is not a value, and it may be a gremlin. It could be immoral. So, and I love that work, really getting in the weeds with people around this. And to your point, I do not use an exercise when defining values where I present a list. Because most people, their initial thing will be to think of morals and they'll just check these things off the list. So actually one of my favorite exercises is saying, if you were to win the lottery today and money was no longer an issue in your life, what would your life look like? And as they're sharing, I'm looking for potential values. And then I'll ask them, what's the importance in each of these choices? And then from there, we'll start to mine for values.
There's another exercise that just came to mind that I've come across through my journaling aspect, which is really a relatively new habit of mine that I'd like to do more and more. I know how powerful it is and can be, but it's all about your ideal day. And it's just without any apology, any limitation, just take an hour, take 2 hours, however long, and just create with no limitation your ideal day. Go as far as you can. And I'm sure as you're saying that, I haven't done that yet. I really need to. I've resisted it because I know that there's so much effort, quote unquote, and mind work around. Now, meanwhile, believe me, it's going to be extraordinary, and I have grand visions. Let's be real. So it's going to be magnificent. But and that's really the point. But I'm guessing through that is when you would be able to read that and say, I get you now. I see a lot of your values in just that.
Yeah, absolutely. And as a coach, I'm always paying attention to the nonverbals. I'm paying attention to people's energy shifts. So again, I'm really looking to decipher between what they think they should be honoring or valuing and who they really are and what, as you mentioned, lights them up, what gets them excited. So that's one of the real values, if you would, of working with a coach, is having that third party really witness you and to keep holding up a mirror to really check out, is this really what you're talking about, or is there something else going on there behind the scenes?
When you're working with, let's say, the Facebook management team or any other executive or employee or business owner, do you find that the broad category of issue is some set of fear?
Uh, Oftentimes, yes. I mean, all of us, we always have a moment to moment we're choosing fear versus love. And that stems in the amygdala, which is the fight, flight, or freeze part of our brain, the most primitive part of our brain. And that's what kicks in quicker for us than the neocortex, the thinking part of our brain. And of course, for survival reasons, that's really necessary. You know, the caveman looking at the dinosaurs or whatever. So we're hardwired to go to constantly, thousands of times a day, you know, fear or love. And so the more aware we are of that, then we can again come to that more conscious choice point about how we want to be in the moment and not necessarily listen to the gremlin or that fear-based place, because our brain lies all the time. We just don't realize it's lying because it's so friggin' loud. We just take it as gospel. Oftentimes, though, it is not who we are truly, our higher self.
I'm very intrigued that the two sides of the coin you presented were fear and love, not something like fear and courage. Fear and love, how is one the opposite of the other? What do you mean by love?
Well, again, it's really about what we're going to move towards versus what we want to run away from. So that's just the label I'm giving love in this case. It's more what's attracting us versus what we want to back away from.
Mm, I love that. I really love that. What what mantra do you live by today?
Mm. Well, one of my favorite affirmations is I am a freedom flyer, surrendering to the flow of now, loving, trusting, and accepting myself and you.
I get it. I feel it. I like it. I could embrace all of that, and I know how it's tough to really get there. And I guess, like you said earlier, it's baby steps, but boy, is it possible. I'm living proof. I spent decades cowering in a corner, sometimes not just metaphorically, and I'm now at a point where slowly but surely, day by day, moment by moment, living in the present, living in the now, staying as conscious and healthy in whatever regard, that's all possible. I love it.
Yeah, and we were talking before about defining success for ourselves. So for myself personally, now as it pertains to my creativity, I'm really redefining what I want out of that. When I first started performing again, I was producing cabaret shows, and those were going very well. I was selling out. I was bringing in other performers. But then after a while, I felt like it was work, and my work mentality was coming into it. So now I'm at a place of what brings me joy and what do I want to be doing as it pertains to my creativity versus what I think I should be doing. And so it's a lifelong journey, and I just love the idea of constantly getting to reflect and recreate ourselves and redefine what it is that we really want.
Looking back on your life, what advice would you give your younger self?
to trust what I call my gentle strength. And my gentle strength is all about honoring my values, my strengths, my intuition, and just to trust that and to love myself for who I am versus what I'm doing and what I'm achieving.
Do you believe that everything happens for a reason?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, all this journey, for many years I lived in regret, and now I really don't have regret at all about it, and I see the way it's all unfolded, the way it's meant to be, and in its own time. We all have this illusion of control, and the only thing we can really control is ourselves and how we hold things. So this all happened the way it was meant to unfold.
Please give us a little insight. What do you mean by illusion of control?
Well, if you think about it, most of us have this illusion that we can control quite a few things. Just to give you an example, in the corporate world, if there's obviously many changes that occur on a regular basis. So when people are in the midst of change, the reason most people have strong emotional reaction to change is because they feel like they've lost control. And they often feel now they're a victim of this change, and they have no control in what is going to happen to them. So one of the things I encourage leaders to do, and what I like to do when I'm in change or working with clients in change, is to take a piece of paper, write 3 columns, what's within your control, what can you influence, and what is out of your control. And those things that are out of your control, as best as you can, let them go. It's just a waste of time and energy. The things that you can influence are often other people in change situations. Oftentimes the end result has been identified, but how we're going to get there has not been identified. So that is an opportunity for an employee or for a manager to be asking employees for their input, for their involvement, to help define that. They can influence that. And then in terms of control, when you think about it, it really just comes down to ourselves. I don't know if you've ever read Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning. He was a Holocaust survivor, and he was a psychiatrist, and he spoke about the challenges of being in the concentration camp. And one of the things that he spoke about was that he remembered seeing people give away their last crust of bread in the huts. And he said that they may have been few in number, but they offer sufficient proof that everything can be taken from man, but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way.
As powerful as that is, you have that memorized?
Partially, and then I have the quote here, so I was able to look at it.
Oh, wow.
I'm not that good.
Well, but I know you're a performer, so it wouldn't be out of the realm of anything. That's magnificent. How are you spiritual or religious in any ways today?
Yeah, so from a religious perspective, I am Jewish. And actually, that's one of the things I'm exploring a lot lately. I joined a new synagogue earlier this year, and I've started singing and leading part of the service. And so that's something that is one of those things. Do I want to do this? Do I feel I should do this? So it's been a great learning and lesson for me around setting boundaries and reconnecting to the intention I want with my singing. And then spiritually, I believe we're all spiritual beings. We are human beings, not human doings. So I'm constantly on a quest spiritually to really reconnect to my higher self. And that higher self is definitely, again, connected to values and strengths and all of that good stuff. So that I feel more integrated as a human being and more aligned as a person.
What do you believe happens when it's all over? when our time here on earth comes to an end?
I'm still contemplating that. I very much would love to believe there is an afterlife. I've had experiences of friends who've lost parents and who have who feel that they have a connection, that they're actually being visited by their parents that passed away. So that gives me hope. I've had some really interesting experiences. Even when my grandma passed away, literally the minute she passed away, I jumped up in my bed and later found out that that was the moment she had passed. So I very much want to believe that there is an afterlife. But of course, as humans, we'll never know. And, that's part of the great mystery. We will never know. And it is so comforting for those people that really do believe that. I kind of envy them in that way, because it's really comforting and gives us a sense of being more grounded when we have that belief and faith that there is something after this life.
Absolutely beautiful. How is singing or performing in general a part of your life today? How have you gotten back into it? What are you doing?
Yeah, so as I mentioned initially, I had the cabaret shows. I did audition a little bit for community theater, but I realized quickly that I couldn't balance all of that with my busy work schedule. I'm also a mom and a wife, so I have quite a full life. And so as I was mentioning right now, synagogue is one avenue for that. And I've also been taking musical improv classes. So for those folks that aren't familiar with that, it's like a regular improv where you might be given a situation or a relationship, and then there's a piano player who just starts playing. And not only are you improving the scene, you're creating through song the entire scene, which is exciting and terrifying all at the same time.
So is that like one of the segments on Whose Line Is It Anyway? I think they used to do something like that.
Absolutely, it's just like that.
And really, I mean, you have the skill and the talent, but I've heard that anybody could benefit from improv.
Yeah, actually, the whole concept behind improv, for those that don't know, is yes and. So for me personally, it's very powerful as a recovering perfectionist to not get stuck in my head, to not get stuck in anxiety and fear about not being good enough, and instead have that mindset of, I can do this. Or whatever idea you bring to me, I could build upon it, as opposed to the knee jerk reaction of saying no.
What is next for you?
Love that question. As I mentioned a little earlier, I am currently the president of the International Coach Federation of Los Angeles, which is a global association for coaches. And that is quite a full-time job, and has been amazing, where I put some really unique strategies into place and we're getting results. So I've been quite busy this year with that, along with my full-time coaching practice. So what I'm really looking forward to next year is starting to reconnect to what I'm desiring creatively and to tap into that. And from that place, that will redefine where I want to go. And one offering that I currently have and that I'm looking forward to getting back into or stepping into it again, is a personal retreat that I call Reconnecting to Your Purpose and Passion. And it really is a boot camp, if you will, for folks that are wanting to reconnect to their values, their strengths, their passion. And we spend 2 days together going through and really helping them tap into that and unleash it. And then it is supported with follow-on coaching to really help them lock in the learning.
Wow. Well, we'll certainly link to all the good you've brought up today. I can't wait for that. I'll leave you with this final question. Rachel Karu, how would you like to be remembered?
Ooh, that's deep. I'd like to be remembered as a courageous person who was willing to honor their purpose and passion regardless of the outcome.
Love it. Love it. Love you. Love everything about this talk. Better than I could have even expected, knowing that we have a common ground for performing. But this went so much further than that. I love it. Did you have a good time?
This was amazing, and I really appreciate your journey and your background too. So it's so nice getting to know you as well.
Well, I think it's no secret that I am a fan, so I'm continuing to follow you, to follow your journey. Like I said, we'll put all the links so people can click around and listen to more of you in every regard. Any final words?
I was just going to say, for anyone interested in learning more, I invite you to go to my website, steppingintomore.com. And there you'll find on my media page all kinds of interviews, clips of me performing, speaking, and you can also find clips of me performing on Facebook and yeah, and all the usual places, LinkedIn, YouTube, all of the above.
Of course, there'll be immediate links to all of this. So with that, we will leave you to carry on your magnificent day. I want to thank you, Rachel, for joining us. I want to thank you, everybody whose ears are attached to this. It's been magnificent. As always, until we do it again, go get 'em.